Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast is 30 C2 level vocabulary on human body.
It's great to be here. This is a topic that feels deceptively simple on the surface. We all have a body, we all know the basics.
Right.
But the gap between, say, knowing you have a throat and truly understanding the function of the larynx, that's a huge canyon in terms of linguistic precision.
It really is. I think for most of us, maybe even native speakers, we get stuck at that nursery rhyme level, head, shoulders, knees, and toes.
Yes.
And it's functional, sure. If you go to a doctor and say, my belly hurts, they'll probably figure it out. But we're not really here for just functional today, are we? We're aiming for something more.
Exactly. We're aiming for articulated, sophisticated C2 level mastery.
And this isn't just about sounding smart in an anatomy class.
Not at all. It's about the power of specificity.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. There's a profound difference between saying, I cut my skin, and saying, I have an abrasion on my epidermis.
Okay, yeah.
One is just a statement of fact. The other, though, it conveys the depth of the injury, the specific layer of tissue involved, and, well, it shows a certain level of educated understanding.
That is the goal today. We want to give you, our listeners, the kind of vocabulary you'd hear in a high-stakes medical drama, or maybe in a piece of classic literature, or a serious scientific discussion.
Right.
So we've laid out a bit of a roadmap. We're going to take a tour of the human body, starting right at the top, the head and the senses. Then we'll move down through the airways into the engine room of the organs.
The engine room, I like that.
Yeah. Then we'll check the structural frame, the bones, and we'll finish up with the control center in the brain.
And I think what's really exciting about this is that we aren't just going to be, rattling off a list of definitions.
Yeah.
These words have stories. They have deep roots in Latin and Greek that tell us so much about how our ancestors saw the world, and they connect to some just incredible real-world history.
So let's just dive right in. Part 1, the head and senses. We're talking about perception and expression here, and I think we have to start with the eyes. They call them the window to the soul, but biologically they're just an engineering marvel.
Absolutely.
And the first word on our list is the iris.
The iris. Okay, so most people know this as the colored ring around the pupil. It's what we're talking about when we say someone has blue eyes or brown eyes.
Sure, the pretty part.
The pretty part, yes. But mechanically, it's so much more than just decoration. It's a muscular shutter.
It's the aperture, right, if we use a camera analogy.
It is the aperture, 100%. It sits right behind the cornea and in front of the lens, and its whole job is to control the amount of light getting into the eye by changing the size of the pupil.
But the word itself, iris, it sounds beautiful.
It is. It comes directly from the Greek word for rainbow.
Which makes perfect sense when you think about the whole spectrum of colors you see in human eyes. But I've always found the uniqueness of the iris to be the most compelling thing about it. We're so used to fingerprints for ID, but iris scanning is, well, it's arguably more secure.
Oh, it is. The patterns in your iris, those little crypts and furrows and pigmented spots, they're all formed randomly while you're still in the womb.
So even identical twins are different.
Even identical twins have completely different iris patterns. It's literally a biological barcode. You can't fake it.
Speaking of distinct irises, we have to talk about David Bowie. You can't bring up the iris without someone mentioning the thin white duke.
Ah, yes. The man who looked like he fell to earth. There's a common misconception that he had heterochromia.
Which is when you have two different colored eyes.
Correct. But that wasn't it. He actually had a condition called anisocoria.
That sounds much more serious.
Well, it implies a mechanical issue rather than just a pigment difference. When Bowie was young, he got into a fight over a girl, and he got punched in the eye. And the trauma from that punch actually paralyzed the tiny muscles in his left iris. So his pupil was just permanently dilated, wide open.
So it wasn't a genetic quirk at all. It was an injury.
A permanent injury. And it made that eye look dark and, well, kind of alien compared to the other one. It absolutely added to his mystique, that whole otherworldly persona he had.
It's amazing how an accident can define an icon.
It is.
Yeah.
And artists have obsessed over the iris for centuries. If you look at these super high-resolution scans of Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, he didn't just paint a black dot for the pupil.
No?
No, he painted the intricate, almost web-like structure of the iris. He understood, even back then, that to make her look truly alive, the eye needed that anatomical complexity.
Let's move a little deeper into the eye then.
Yeah.
Past the iris, past the lens, to the very back of the eyeball. We have the retina.
The retina. This is the sensory membrane that lines the inner surface of the back of the eye. So if the iris is the aperture, the retina is the film. or, in modern terms, the digital sensor.
This is where the physics of light becomes the chemistry of the brain.
That's a perfect way to put it. It captures the light and it converts it into neural signals that then travel down the optic nerve to your brain. The etymology is actually quite lovely. It comes from the Latin word rete.
Rete.
Which means net.
A net, as in a fishing net.
Exactly. Because when early anatomists who didn't have powerful microscopes, when they dissected the eye, they saw this delicate net-like structure of blood vessels and nerves. It's a very descriptive term.
There's a really kind of a frightening connection here to space travel. I was reading about that NASA study with the astronaut Scott Kelly.
Oh, yes. This is a massive issue for any future Mars missions. They call it SANS, Spaceflight-Associated Neuroocular Syndrome.
Right.
See, here on Earth, gravity pulls all your bodily fluids down. But in space, that fluid just sort of floats up and it increases the pressure inside your skull.
Which would press on the back of the eyes?
Precisely.
Yeah.
NASA found that this pressure actually flattens the shape of the eyeball and pushes the retina forward.
So astronauts are literally having their vision reshaped by microgravity. That's incredible.
Scott Kelly came back to Earth with structural changes to his retinas. It put a whole new spin on the challenges of deep space travel. I mean, if we send people to Mars, will they even be able to see clearly when they get there? We don't really know yet.
That's wild. And historically, our understanding of the retina was totally backward for a while, wasn't it? Didn't people used to think our eyes shot out lasers or something?
The emission theory, yes. For the longest time, scholars, even brilliant ones, thought that beams of light shot out of our eyes to touch objects.
Wow.
It was a scholar named Ibn al-Haytham back in the 11th century who corrected this. He was under house arrest, basically stuck in a dark room, and he started studying how light entered through a tiny pinhole. He was the one who realized the eye is a receptor, not a projector.
And that shifted the focus to the retina being the screen, the canvas.
It changed everything.
I'm definitely glad we figured that one out. Now, protecting all of this delicate internal machinery is the cornea.
The cornea. This is the transparent front part of the eye. It covers the iris, the pupil, the whole front assembly.
I have to ask about the name, because I see the root word corn in there. It seems a little odd.
You do. It comes from the Latin word corneus, which means horny.
Okay. We should probably clarify that immediately for everyone listening.
Please, yes. It means horn-like, as in the horn of a bull or a rhinoceros. It's referring to the toughness and the texture of the tissue. It's hard, it's transparent, and it's protective. It's the windshield of the eye.
A living windshield. But I've heard it's unique in how it gets its fuel.
It is the only living tissue in the human body that does not contain blood vessels. It's a vascular.
Why is that?
Well, think about it. If it had blood vessels, you wouldn't be able to see through it. The little red veins would completely block your vision.
Ah, of course.
So instead, it has to get its oxygen directly from the air and all its nutrients from your tears.
Which makes it incredibly vulnerable to the outside world.
And yet, on the other hand, highly transplantable. Because there's no blood, there's very little risk of the body rejecting a corneal transplant. But yes, it's totally exposed. Muhammad Ali, the great boxer, suffered constantly from corneal abrasions.
Scratches on the surface.
Excruciatingly painful ones. When you get hit, or even if you just scratch your eye, that horn-like layer can be scraped, and the cornea is just loaded with nerve endings.
It also features so heavily in science fiction. Blade Runner has that famous scene about corneal implants. It's always used as a symbol of identity, isn't it?
It really is. It represents that thin, transparent boundary between our inner self and the outer world.
Let's move down from the eyes to the mouth. We're entering the realm of consumption and communication. Let's talk teeth, specifically the incisor.
The incisor. These are the front four teeth, top and bottom. They're flat, they're chisel-shaped, and they're designed for one thing: shearing, cutting.
The name gives it away instantly.
It does. It comes straight from the Latin incidere, which means to cut into. It's the exact same root as incision or scissors.
So when you bite into an apple, you're not grinding it, you're slicing a chunk off.
That is the incisors' job.
There's a very dark side to the uniqueness of our incisors, especially in criminal history. The Ted Bundy case comes to mind immediately.
This is maybe the most famous case of forensic odontology in history. Ted Bundy was this horrific serial killer, but he was always very careful not to leave fingerprints.
Right.
However, during his final rampage at a sorority house in Florida, he bit one of his victims.
And because his teeth were crooked?
Specifically his incisors. He had a chipped incisor and a really unique alignment that created a very distinct pattern. Investigators took a mold of his teeth, and they matched it perfectly to the bite mark on the victim's body.
Wow.
That incision pattern is what helped send him to the electric chair. A grim reminder that our teeth can be as individual as our DNA.
On a much, much lighter note, culturally, the incisor is the absolute centerpiece of the smile. When we look at someone like Julia Roberts, we're really admiring their perfectly aligned incisors.
It's the social tooth, the first one you show when you smile or greet someone.
And flanking those incisors, we have the canine.
The canine. It's also known as the cuspid. These are the slightly pointed teeth at the corners of your mouth. The etymology is very straightforward. It's Latin for of a dog.
Because dogs, and really all carnivores, have these massive ones for tearing.
Exactly. It points directly to our own evolutionary history. We're omnivores, we have incisors for cutting plants and fruits, and we have canines for tearing meat. It's a vestige of our predatory past.
And of course, this is the tooth of the monster. This is the vampire tooth.
The entire vampire myth is centered on the canine tooth. It's the feature that transforms a human into a predator. But what's interesting is that in modern cosmetic dentistry, a lot of people want their canines softened, filed down to look less aggressive.
Unless you're Tom Cruise in his early career.
True. If you go back and watch The Outsiders, his teeth were, well, they were a mess. He famously had extensive work done to align his canines and incisors to the midline of his face.
And it completely changed his look.
It changed his entire facial symmetry. It just shows how much the structure of these teeth supports the lips and the shape of the face.
Now, coating all of these different teeth is enamel.
Enamel. And this is the hardest substance in the entire human body. Harder than bone.
Really? Harder than bone?
Oh, yeah. It's about 96% mineral, mostly a compound called hydroxyapatite.
Hydroxyapatite, that is a C2 word if I've ever heard one.
It's the crystalline mineral structure that gives teeth their incredible strength. The word enamel comes from an old French word, esmale, which refers to a varnish or a glassy coating.
That's very appropriate. It looks like a ceramic glaze. But even though it's the hardest substance, it has one fatal weakness. Acid.
It is chemically basic, so acid just dissolves it. This is why a disorder like bulimia is so devastating for oral health. The stomach acid from frequent vomiting washes over the teeth and literally erodes the enamel.
And unlike skin or bone, it doesn't grow back?
It does not regenerate. Once it's gone, it is gone for good.
That's terrifying. It's a non-renewable resource inside our own bodies.
It is, which is why ancient civilizations were obsessed with preserving it. The Egyptians, for example, used a paste made from crushed pumice and vinegar to clean their teeth. It probably did more harm than good with the acid, but they were trying. They understood its value.
Okay, moving from the hard teeth to the soft tongue, let's talk about the taste bud.
The gustatory cells. We call them buds because under a microscope, they really do look like tiny little flower buds on the surface of the tongue. They're the sensory organs for the 5 basic tastes: sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami.
I read something about them that gave me a lot of hope. They regenerate.
They do. They are one of the fastest regenerating tissues in the body. They have a life cycle of about 10 to 14 days, give or take.
So that's why if you burn your tongue on hot coffee, you're not doomed forever.
Exactly. You might not be able to taste much for a few days, but 2 weeks later, you have a fresh set of sensors ready to go.
But not everyone's taste buds are created equal, are they?
Not at all. We have what are called super tasters. These are people, maybe about 25% of the population, who have a much higher density of taste buds on their tongue.
So for them, flavors are just more intense.
Especially bitter flavors. They're overwhelming. So if you're someone who absolutely hates broccoli or dark, hoppy beer, you might not just be a picky eater. You might be genetically more sensitive.
Laughs. So I might be a super taster.
You might be. But we really saw the profound value of taste buds during the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the hallmark symptoms was ageusia, the total loss of taste.
It seems like a minor symptom compared to the lung issues at the time, but people who had it really struggled mentally.
It was devastating for them. It leads to depression, anxiety. We just don't realize how much of our daily joy and our social bonding is tied to stimulating these tiny little buds until they suddenly stop working.
Okay, let's wrap up the head with the ears and the nose. First, the eardrum.
The tympanic membrane. The common name eardrum is a perfect description. It's ear plus drum. It's a thin, taut piece of skin stretched over a bone frame, just like a snare drum.
And it vibrates when sound waves hit it.
Precisely. And just like a real drum, if you hit it too hard, it bursts. We call that a perforated eardrum. It's a common injury for scuba divers and pilots because of barotrauma, those rapid changes in pressure.
The story of Beethoven in this context is just heartbreaking.
Is the ultimate tragedy in music history, isn't it? As his eardrums and inner ear mechanisms progressively failed, he became physically deaf.
But he found a way around it.
He did. He used something called bone conduction. He would sometimes clench a metal rod in his teeth and touch the other end to his piano. That way he could feel the vibrations rattling through his skull, completely bypassing the broken eardrum.
That is just pure, unbelievable determination. Okay, last one for the head. The sinus.
The sinus. These are the air-filled cavities located within the bones of your face and skull. The word itself is Latin for a curve or a fold or a pocket.
Most of us only ever notice them when we have a cold and they get blocked and painful.
Right, sinusitis. But historically, they served a rather gruesome purpose. When the ancient Egyptians were mummifying a pharaoh, they had to remove the brain to prevent it from rotting. But they didn't want to smash open the skull.
So how did they do it?
Well, they inserted a long hook up the pharaoh's nose, punched through the very thin bone in the back of the sinus cavity, and then basically scrambled the brain and extracted it piece by piece through the nostrils.
That is incredibly vivid and horrible.
It's efficient anatomy. And in the early days of aviation, sinuses were an absolute nightmare for pilots. Amelia Earhart wrote about the agony of flying with a sinus block.
Because of the pressure change.
Exactly. As she ascended, the air trapped inside her sinus would expand, but if the opening was blocked by mucus, it had nowhere to go. She said it felt like her face was exploding from the inside out.
It's another example of how our bodies really weren't designed for the environments we've created.
Not at all.
Okay, let's travel down. Part 2. Breath and voice. The airway. We're in the throat now. First word. Trachea.
The trachea, or as most people know it, the windpipe. This is the main highway for air. It connects the larynx down to the bronchi of the lungs, and it's a rigid tube reinforced with C-shaped rings of cartilage.
It has to be rigid so it doesn't collapse when we inhale, right? Like a vacuum cleaner hose.
That's the perfect analogy. It has to stay open. The name comes from the Greek trachea, which meant rough artery. Ancient anatomists mistakenly thought arteries carried air, and they noticed this particular tube was bumpy or rough because of those cartilage rings.
We hear about this in emergency medicine all the time, the tracheotomy.
Right, a tracheotomy is the procedure where you cut an opening into the trachea to bypass a blockage higher up in the mouth or throat.
But the trachea has also been the site of just immense tragedy. I'm thinking of the 1918 flu pandemic.
The terrible example. The virus caused such severe inflammation that the delicate lining of the trachea would literally die and slew off, creating a membrane that would block the airway. People suffocated because their own air highway had collapsed.
And for athletes, this tube can be the limiting factor.
Look at Jackie Joyner-Kersee, one of the greatest Olympians of all time. She had severe exercise-induced asthma. She described the feeling of an attack not just as shortness of breath, but specifically as her trachea constricting like a tunnel narrowing down to a pinhole. Managing that tracheal inflammation was the difference between a gold medal and passing out on the track.
And connected right on top of the trachea is the larynx.
The larynx, the voice box. It sits right at the top of the trachea. The word is Greek for upper windpipe. This is the instrument.
It's so complex, isn't it? It's much more than just a tube.
Oh, it's a masterpiece of engineering. It's a valve system. It contains the vocal cords, these tiny flaps in tissue. When we speak or sing, we're passing air over them and making them vibrate. But what's really interesting is that speech was not its original purpose. Its primary evolutionary purpose was protection. When you swallow food, the larynx shoots up and a little flap called the epiglottis covers it, sealing off the airway to stop food from going down the wrong pipe and killing you. Speech is just a happy accident.
We see the fragility of the larynx in professional singers. Adele had that major vocal surgery a few years back.
She had a vocal cord hemorrhage. Basically, she sang with such force that a tiny blood vessel on the surface of her vocal cord burst. It's like getting a bruise on a violin string. It just ruins the sound.
It shows that even the most powerful, talented voice is still just biological tissue that can break.
It's so delicate. It reminds me of Winston Churchill, too.
Really?
Oh, yes. The man gave so many rousing speeches during the war. He suffered from chronic laryngeal strain. He essentially talked his voice box into a state of permanent exhaustion. He had to rely on antiseptic lozenges constantly just to get through those radio broadcasts that were so vital for Britain's morale.
Now, when the whole respiratory system gets irritated or infected, we produce phlegm.
Phlegm, a wonderful guttural word for a gross substance. It's the thick, viscous mucus that's secreted by the membranes of the respiratory tract.
And the word comes from?
It comes from the Greek phlegma, which meant inflammation or heat.
Which is funny because the personality type phlegmatic means someone who is cool and calm and unemotional.
That goes all the way back to the theory of the four humors. Ancient and medieval medicine believed the body's health was a balance of four fluids: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm.
And each one was tied to a temperament.
Exactly. Phlegm was associated with water, with winter, and with a slow, sluggish, unemotional temperament. So if you were described as phlegmatic, it meant you were chill. You didn't get angry easily.
It's amazing how a medical mistake from 500 years ago still shapes our personality descriptions today.
It is. But, in the 20th century, phlegm became the symbol of the tobacco epidemic. The smoker's cough, that rattling sound, is basically the body trying to mobilize massive amounts of excess phlegm to clear out all the tar and toxins from the lungs. It became the auditory signal of lung damage.
Let's go deeper into the body. Part 3, the engine room. We're talking about the trunk and the organs inside it. Let's start with the container itself. The trunk.
The trunk. In anatomy, this refers to the torso, the central part of the human body, everything except the head, neck, and limbs. It comes from the Latin word truncus, which means the stem or the main body of a tree.
It implies stability, core strength.
It does. It houses all the vital machinery. You can lose a limb and survive. If you lose function in the trunk, you're in serious trouble. In art history, especially with Greek sculpture, the trunk was often idealized to show the cuirass aesthetique, the armor of muscle, protecting the vital organs.
And in modern safety engineering, protecting the trunk is the absolute top priority.
Think about car safety. Frontal airbags are designed to stop your head, but side curtain airbags are designed specifically to protect the trunk. Why? Because blunt force trauma to the trunk is what ruptures the spleen, the liver, the kidneys. Protecting the trunk is the #1 goal of automotive safety design.
Feeding into this trunk is the esophagus.
The esophagus, the muscular tube that connects your throat down to your stomach. The name is from Greek, oesophagus, which just means gullet. It's a transport system.
There's a persistent mystery around the death of the magician Harry Houdini that involves this whole area.
The great escape artist. He died on Halloween in 1926. The famous story is that a university student asked if he could test Houdini's famously strong stomach muscles by punching him.
And Houdini agreed.
He did. But the student punched him before he had a chance to brace himself. He died a few days later from what was officially diagnosed as a ruptured appendix. But there's a lot of medical debate that the generalized trauma to the trunk and the shock to the whole system, including the esophagus, might have contributed to that systemic failure. It just highlights how vulnerable all the soft tissue in the trunk really is.
And for millions of living people, the esophagus is a source of daily misery. Heartburn.
GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. We have to be precise here. It's what happens when the valve at the bottom of the esophagus fails and stomach acid splashes back up.
And the esophagus can't handle that.
It is not lined like the stomach is. It can't handle the acid. Over time, this can lead to a condition called Barrett's esophagus, where the cells of the esophagus actually start to mutate to try and survive the acid, and that is a major precursor to cancer.
Okay, let's look at some of the chemical processors in the engine room. First up, the pancreas.
The pancreas, a large gland that's kind of tucked in behind the stomach. The name is Greek, pan, meaning all, and krios, meaning flesh. So all flesh.
It's a dual thread organ, isn't it?
It really is. It produces digestive enzymes, but more importantly, it regulates our blood sugar by producing insulin and glucagon. And the story of insulin is one of the greatest moments in medical history.
Before 1921, a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes was a death sentence.
A slow, wasting death sentence.
Yeah.
Children would just waste away. Then, in a lab in Toronto, 2 researchers, Banting and Best, managed to isolate the secretion from the pancreas of dogs.
And they injected it into dying patients.
They did, and it was a resurrection. Children who were in diabetic comas literally woke up. It was an absolute miracle.
But the pancreas is also known for being a very silent killer.
Steve Jobs, his very public battle with pancreatic cancer, raised global awareness. The pancreas is located so deep inside the body, it's hard to palpate, hard to feel. By the time you develop symptoms, the cancer is often very advanced. It's an organ that demands our respect.
And working alongside these organs is a specific fluid, bile.
Bile. It's a greenish-brown alkaline fluid that's produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder. Its main job is to emulsify fats. Basically, it's the body's dish soap.
It breaks down grease so we can digest it.
That's its job.
The mythology here is intense. The story of Prometheus.
The titan who stole fire from the gods for humanity. As punishment, Zeus chained him to a rock and sent an eagle to eat his liver every single day.
And every night, the liver grew back.
And what's amazing is the Greeks were scientifically accurate.
Yeah.
The liver is the only internal organ that can significantly regenerate. They understood that this regenerative power was tied to the production of vital fluids like bile.
And in modern diets, bile is the key to the gallstone problem.
It is. Gallstones are often just hardened deposits of digestive fluid. If you go on a crash diet and you stop eating fat entirely, your bile just sits in the gallbladder and stagnates. It can crystallize and turn into painful stones. You actually need to eat some healthy fats to keep the bile flowing properly.
Okay, next up is a mysterious one. The spleen.
The spleen. It sits on your left side, up under your rib cage. The name comes from the Greek splen. It acts as a big blood filter. It recycles old red blood cells and it stores platelets, which help with clotting.
We have that idiom, to vent your spleen.
Which means to fly into a rage, to let out your anger. This goes back to the four humors again. The spleen was believed to be the source of melancholy, or black bile, which was associated with anger and depression. The French poet Baudelaire even wrote a collection of poems called Le Spleen de Paris, using the organ as a metaphor for existential boredom and disgust.
So it had a bad reputation, but biologically it's like the body's bouncer.
It is. It kicks out the old, worn-out blood cells. And in places with high rates of malaria, like parts of sub-Saharan Africa, doctors often see splenomegaly, which is an enlarged spleen.
Why does it get bigger?
Because the organ is working overtime trying to filter out all the red blood cells that have been infected by the malaria parasite. It physically swells up from the effort.
It's also famously the first organ to pop in a car crash.
It's very vascular, meaning it's full of blood and it's not well protected. Seatbelt trauma often ruptures it. There's a classic diagnostic trick called Kerr's sign, where a patient with a ruptured spleen doesn't feel pain in their abdomen, but in their left shoulder. It's a phenomenon called referred pain.
Let's move to the waste management system, starting with an adjective, renal.
Renal, from the Latin renalis. It simply means related to the kidneys.
We hear renal failure much more often than kidney failure in a medical context.
Yes, it's the clinical term. The kidneys are the body's sophisticated filtration plant. Historically, back in the 19th century, kidney disease was often just called Bright's disease. It was a catch-all term for any kind of renal inflammation.
And today, the scarcity of organs for renal transplants is a major bioethical issue.
The kidney is the most commonly transplanted organ, and yet the wait lists are years and years long. It really highlights how difficult it is for our technology to replicate what biology does so elegantly. I mean, a dialysis machine is the size of a refrigerator. Your kidney is the size of your fist. We still can't beat nature's design.
Next is intestinal.
Another adjective. For the intestines, it comes from the Latin intestinus, meaning internal.
The new frontier here is what they call the gut-brain axis.
This is absolutely cutting-edge C2 science. We used to think the intestines were just a tube for absorbing food. Now we know that the microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your intestines, is constantly producing neurotransmitters, like serotonin, the happy chemical.
So your intestinal health literally dictates your mood.
It does. So when you talk about having a gut feeling, that's biologically real. Your intestines are signaling your brain.
Then we have a specific part of that system, the colon.
The colon. The
Yeah.
large intestine. Its main job is to absorb water and salts from what's left of your food, turning it into solid waste. The word comes from the Greek colon.
We tragically lost the actor Chadwick Boseman, the Black Panther, to colon cancer.
That was a cultural shockwave. He was young, he was incredibly fit, he was a superhero on screen. His death smashed the stereotype that colon cancer is just a disease for the elderly. It sparked a massive and much-needed increase in younger people seeking screenings.
It showed that even the strongest bodies can have these hidden vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. And historically, the Romans were obsessed with the colon.
They were.
Oh, yes. They were huge proponents of enemas. They believed that good health depended on keeping the colon completely empty and cleansed. It was a major part of their hygiene rituals.
And finally, for this section, the exit route, the urethra.
The urethra. This is the
Right.
tube that carries urine from the bladder to the outside of the body.
Yeah.
From the Greek urethra.
There's a significant gender difference in the anatomy here that explains a lot of medical statistics.
Anatomy dictates destiny in this case. The female urethra is much, much shorter than the male urethra.
And that means
It means bacteria have a much shorter journey to travel from the outside world up into the bladder to cause an infection. That is a simple anatomical reason why women suffer from UTIs, urinary tract infections, at a hugely higher rate than men do.
I remember reading about a horrifying medieval treatment called sounding.
Oh, this is painful to even describe. Before the invention of things like laser surgery, if a man had a kidney stone that got stuck in his urethra, doctors would use a tool called a sound, which was basically a thin metal rod, and insert it up the urethra to try and smash the stone or push it back into the bladder.
I think everyone listening just winced.
It was barbaric, but for a long time it was the only option they had.
Okay, let's move to part 4. Structure and movement, bones and skin. Let's look at the frame. The big one.
The femur.
The femur, the thigh bone. It is the longest, the heaviest, and the strongest bone in the human body. The name is just the Latin word femur.
It's an engineering marvel. It has to support the entire weight of the upper body. It has to withstand incredible forces. When you run or jump, the force exerted on your femur can be 10 times your body weight. This is why when you go to a natural history museum, the biggest bone you see on any dinosaur skeleton is always the femur. It has to scale up. Because of the square cube law, as animals get bigger, their leg bones have to get exponentially thicker just to hold them up.
And in forensics, this is the go-to bone for identification.
If you find a human skeleton in the woods, the femur is a gold standard for estimating height. There's a very reliable mathematical ratio between the length of the femur and a person's total stature. It's the first thing a forensic anthropologist will measure.
Moving up to the shoulder area, the scapula.
The scapula, or the shoulder blade, it's that large triangular bone on your upper back. The name is from the Latin scapula.
This bone is part of what makes us human, or rather, what makes us primates.
Correct.
Yeah.
If you look at a four-legged animal, like a dog or a horse, their shoulder blades are on the sides of their body.
Yeah.
Ours are on our back. And this orientation is what allows for brachiation, the ability to swing our arms in a full 360-degree circle.
Like an ape swinging from a tree.
Or like a human throwing a baseball or swimming the freestyle stroke. It's a primate specialty.
Michelangelo's statue of David really shows this off beautifully.
It does. If you look at the back of the statue, the scapula isn't sculpted flat. It's shown with tension, slightly winged. It implies that David is about to move, that he's about to sling that stone. Michelangelo captured the potential energy of that whole shoulder mechanism.
And then connecting the trunk to the legs, we have the hips, the pelvis.
The pelvis, the basin-shaped structure of bones. The word is Latin for basin, which is a perfect description.
This is ground zero for the evolution of walking on two legs.
Bipedalism. When our ancient ancestors stood up, the pelvis had to completely change its shape. It became shorter and wider to support the weight of the internal organs against gravity. But this created a brand new problem, the obstetrical dilemma.
The birthing issue.
Precisely. For efficient walking, the opening in the pelvis had to get narrower. But at the same time, the fetal brain was getting bigger and bigger. This evolutionary compromise made childbirth much more difficult and dangerous for humans than for any other primate. It's a conflict written directly into our bones.
And culturally, the pelvis is rhythm.
It's the center of rhythm. Think about Latin American dance, salsa, bachata, merengue. The movement originates in the pelvis. It's a celebration of that unique bipedal structure, of isolating the hips from the ribcage.
Okay, now for the connectors and the coverings. The famous Achilles tendon.
The thickest and strongest tendon in the body. It connects your calf muscle to your heel bone. And it's named, of course, after the great Greek hero, Achilles.
The myth is one of the most iconic stories ever told.
His mother, the goddess Thetis, dipped him in the magical river Styx to make him invulnerable, but she held him by his heel. So that was the only spot on his body that remained dry, his only mortal weakness. And that's where Paris shot him with an arrow, killing him.
And we still use the phrase Achilles heel to mean a person's fatal weakness. But in the world of sports, an Achilles rupture is just devastating.
Ask the late Kobe Bryant. In 2013, he tore his Achilles tendon. People who were there described hearing a loud pop, like a gunshot. That's how much tension that tendon is under. It's a career-threatening injury because you completely lose the ability to push off the ground. You can't run, you can't jump.
Then we have the outer covering of the body, the epidermis.
The epidermis, the outermost layer of the skin. The word is Greek, epi, meaning upon, and derma, meaning skin. So upon the skin. It provides a waterproof barrier, and it's where we get our skin tone from.
Here is a nuance I love, tattoos.
Yes. If you just draw on yourself with a pen, it's on the epidermis, and it fades in a few days because the epidermis is constantly shedding its dead cells. A tattoo needle has to puncture through the epidermis and deposit the ink into the stable layer underneath the dermis.
So if the needle doesn't go deep enough,
the tattoo will literally flake off with your skin in a month.
And environmentally, the epidermis can be a warning system.
In animals like frogs and other amphibians, the epidermis is permeable. They actually breathe and drink through their skin. This makes them incredibly sensitive to pollutants in the water. So if the local frog population starts dying off, we know the water is toxic. Their epidermis is the canary in the coal mine for the entire ecosystem.
Finally, for this section, bone marrow.
Bone marrow, the soft, spongy tissue that's found inside our larger bones. The name comes from old Germanic roots. This is the factory where all our blood cells, red cells, white cells, platelets are made.
We encounter this in cuisine as a bit of a luxury item.
Ossobuco. When you eat that delicious braised veal shank, the prize is scooping the rich, fatty marrow out of the center of the bone.
But medically, it's the very substance of life.
Bone marrow transplants. For a patient with leukemia, the bone marrow is where the cancer lives. So doctors have to use chemotherapy to completely wipe out the patient's own marrow and then replace it with a healthy donor's marrow to restart the blood factory. It was central to Lance Armstrong's cancer recovery, the constant monitoring of his blood counts, which all originate in the marrow.
And in extreme history.
Starvation. In forensic cases from WWII, during famines, bodies were found where the bone marrow had turned from its normal fatty reddish state to a watery gelatinous substance. The body, in its final desperate attempt to survive, had consumed its very last reserve of fat, the marrow itself.
We are in the home stretch, part 5, the control center and life cycle. The brain and reproduction. First, the cortex.
The cortex. This is the outer layer of the cerebrum, the main part of the brain. It's composed of what we call gray matter. In Latin, cortex means bark or rind, like the peel of an orange.
This is the seat of consciousness. This is where we happen.
This is where you happen. Memory, attention, perception, thought, language, it's all in the cortex.
Yeah.
And the concept of neuroplasticity is absolutely key here. There's a neuroanatomist, Jill Bolt Taylor, who had a massive stroke that completely shut down her left cortex.
And she wrote a book about it.
She gave a famous TED Talk. She described the surreal experience of feeling herself, her ego, literally dissolve as her cortex went offline. But she also described how over years of rehabilitation, she was able to slowly rebuild those connections.
It shows the incredible resilience of the cortex. But we also have the dark history of the lobotomy.
A truly tragic chapter in medicine. In the mid-20th century, doctors would sever the connections to the prefrontal cortex as a misguided cure for mental illness. As you see in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it didn't cure them. It often left them in a vegetative, zombie-like state. It destroyed the personality in an attempt to manage the behavior.
A specific subdivision of the brain is called the lobe.
A lobe. It's a general anatomical term that just describes a rounded, projecting part of an organ. You have earlobes, lobes of the lung, and of course the 4 major lobes of the brain.
The story of Phineas Gage is the classic psychology case study here. You can't study psychology without hearing about him.
You cannot. Phineas Gage, 1848. He was a railroad foreman in Vermont. There was an explosion, and it blasted a 13-pound iron tamping rod straight up through his left cheek, behind his eye, and out the top of his skull.
And he lived.
He stood up and talked minutes later. It's unbelievable. But the rod had completely destroyed most of his left frontal lobe. Before the accident, he was known as a responsible, polite, hardworking man. After the accident, he was rude, profane, and completely unreliable. His friends famously said he was no longer Gage.
This was the first definitive proof that our personality is physically located in the lobes of our brain.
It was the case that started modern neuroscience.
And finally, a word that completely changed the course of medical history. The cervix.
The cervix. The lower, narrow part of the uterus that forms a canal between the uterus and the vagina. The word is Latin for neck.
We have to tell the story of Henrietta Lacks.
This is perhaps the most important story in all of modern cell biology. In 1951, a young African-American woman named Henrietta Lacks went to Johns Hopkins Hospital because she had a tumor on her cervix. The doctors took a sample of her cancer cells for research without her knowledge or consent.
And those cells were different.
They were immortal. Most human cells die after a few divisions in a petri dish. But Henrietta's cells, which came to be known as HeLa cells, just kept growing. They are still growing today in labs all over the world.
And they were used for everything.
They were used to develop the polio vaccine. They were the first human cells ever cloned. They were sent to space to see what would happen to them in zero gravity. They've been used in cancer research, AIDS research, gene mapping. Almost every major medical breakthrough of the last 70 years owes something to HeLa cells.
But she died without knowing any of this, and her family was kept in the dark for decades.
She died in poverty, and her family didn't find out for decades that her cells were literally changing the world and making pharmaceutical companies billions of dollars.
Yeah.
It raises huge, unresolved ethical questions about bodily autonomy, consent, and profit in medicine. But anatomically, it all started with a mutation in the cells of her cervix.
It's just a profound and complicated legacy.
It is a single anatomical location that unlocked the secrets of cellular immortality.
So we've completed our tour of the body, from the iris that gives us our unique biometric identity to the femur that shows our evolutionary relationship with gravity, all the way to the cervix that gave us the foundations of modern medicine.
And that really is the point of this deep dive, isn't it? When you use these words, so when you choose to say epidermis instead of skin or larynx instead of throat, you're not just trying to sound smart.
Oh.
You are acknowledging the incredible complexity of the biological machine we all live in. You're connecting your language to history, to art, to evolution, and to the human experience.
It shows finesse. It shows that you understand the nuance of how we function, both as individuals and as a species.
Precisely. The body isn't just biology. It's a map of our past and our future. And knowing the right words helps you read that map.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for taking us on this fascinating tour.
It was my absolute pleasure, a real joy.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.